and welcome to the first in a series of videos that explain exactly what Neon Sanctum is. In this episode we're going to cover the all-important skill cards and how players use them. So what is a skill card? Well, at a high level, skill cards in Neon Sanctum represent 4 different elements of a character. The first is an ability. Each card is colour coded, and that colour represents a broad ability area, such as combat, science or medicine. The card also represents a more specific skill within that ability area. So for example, a red combat card may represent shooting, melee or unarmed attacks. Next up, each skill is a special power that characters can use during the combat phase of the game. Most of the information shown on the skill cards is utilised when using these powers. Powers aren't always attacks, they could be defensive or even buffing actions for helping out your allies or even buffing yourself. Finally, when characters in Neon Sanctum take damage, they don't lose hit points or gain wounds, instead they lose cards. This means that as a character takes damage, their options become more restricted. If a character's lost all of their cards due to damage, they're in serious danger of dying. At the point of release, there's 7 different ability areas in Neon Sanctum. These are Combat, which are red, Engineering in a dark green, Physical in dark blue, Medical cards are light green, Science are yellow, Social purple, and Survival cards are orange. One of the great things about having skills packaged up into ability areas is it makes the game really modular. If an ability doesn't suit the type of game you're looking to run, then the DM can always choose to remove that ability area from the game. Players simply don't use those cards when making characters. Eventually we plan to add additional expansions that DMs can choose to add into the game to change up exactly the type of game they want. When a character tries to perform an action, and the DM believes the results of those actions are both dramatic and in question, then the player must make a skill check. There's no reason for players to make skill checks if the action is either trivial, or the results of the check simply don't add anything dramatic to the game. The DM will tell the player both the ability and skill that they believe is required to perform the action. For example, picking a locked door would require the engineering ability and the mechanical skill. The DM will then inform the player of a target number that the player needs to reach in order for the action to be successful. The player then has the chance to play a card. If the player has a card with a mechanical skill, they can play this and they add the card's level, the icon in the top left, to their dice roll. If the player has a card in the engineering ability, but it's not the mechanical skill, for example it could be hacking or electrical, then they play this card, but they don't add the card's level to the dice. They simply don't get a penalty. Finally, if the player doesn't have any cards in that ability or skill, but they still want to have a go at the action, they can roll the dice, but reduce the score by 2. The player then rolls 2d10, adds the numbers together, and adds any modifiers, to give a final score. If this score is greater than the target score that the DM set, then they've been successful in an attempt. If it isn't, then they've failed. The more points the player surpasses the target score by, the better they perform the action. The opposite is also true. Further below the target score, the worse they failed to perform the action. Finally, the player always places any cards they've used to perform the check into their cooldown deck. Cards in the cooldown deck can't be used to perform a skill check until the end of that scene. So that wraps it up. Thank you very much for watching our video. The next video in our tutorial series will be an introduction to item cards.